Hi, this is Catherine from India Unrevealed. Among many historical cities in India, there are three unforgettable glorious places. Varanasi, an ancient river city, stands evident to explain the 3,000 years of historical records. Delhi, a political epicenter, sheltered and served as a capital for various dynasties. At last, Hampi, a renowned city of medieval times that is glorified with all its riches and lost civilization. In this video, I have chosen the accounts of these three glorious places of great historical importance in India. Varanasi is a site of huge religious importance, and one of the world's oldest cities, continually inhabited, never abandoned. On the banks of the sacred river Ganga, 3,000-year-old Varanasi is revered as holiest city in Hinduism. It's a temple-packed place of pilgrimage and cultural center. According to Hindu myth, Varanasi, also known as Benares, was established by the god Shiva more than 10,000 years ago. Archaeological evidence suggests that the city has been lived in since at least 1800 BCE, and has been progressively built upon until the present day. The city sprang up in the floodplains of the Ganges basin, and the river proved vital for trade and transport. Varanasi became a major hub for craft and commerce, and by the 6th century BCE, its bustling markets brimmed with merchants dealing in coveted goods such as silk, muslin, essential oils, and ivory. Some traditional trades from the era thrive today, and dozens of perfumeries still line many of the old town's lanes. As its economic importance grew, Varanasi flourished as a regional center for religion, education, and art. In 528 BCE, Gautama Buddha chose Sarnath, in the city outskirts, as the site for his first sermon. By then, Varanasi had become the capital of the kingdom of Kashi, literally, a place of radiance that ensues from knowledge and enlightenment. The city is still known as Kashi, and the name is the origin of its nickname, City of Light. In the 4th century BCE, the Mauryan Empire of eastern India grew to control most of the country, and, around 260 BCE, Emperor Ashoka renounced Hinduism for Buddhism, turning the spotlight on Varanasi due to the city's proximity to Sarnath. The city began attracting religious leaders, academics, and philosophers from across Asia. The Chinese monk Xuanzang, who played a crucial role in spreading Buddhist ideas between India and China, visited in 635 CE and noted that the thriving city stretched for 5 kilometers along the western bank of Ganga. Then, in the 8th century, the great Indian spiritualist Adi Shankaracharya arrived in Varanasi and founded a sect of the Hindu deity Shiva. The sect's foundation, alongside the legend of the city's divine creation, meant Varanasi grew in spiritual importance for Hindus. In the centuries that followed, thousands of shrines were built to the Hindu gods, from modest riverside altars to grand centers of worship like the Shiva-dedicated Kashi Vishwanath temple. Varanasi became known as the City of Temples. In the 12th century CE, the Islamic Sultanate of Delhi expanded across India, and the Kashi Vishwanath temple was desecrated by invaders in 1194 CE. Varanasi's glory dwindled, but the city retained its status as a religious and educational center, and played a critical role in the birth of new sects and beliefs. The Bhakti movement, which emphasized worship through music and dance, and broke away from Hinduism's rigid caste and gender structure, had its origins here in 15th century CE, and some of the tradition's leaders such as the mystics Kabir and Ravidas, were born in the city. The Sikh leader Guru Nanak travelled here in 1507 CE. His embracing of the Bhakti tradition was instrumented in the development of Sikhism as a major Indian religion. The 15th and 16th centuries were a period of artistic fertility too, and numerous artisans and musicians emerged from Varanasi. Kathak, one of India's most iconic classic dance traditions, was born here. Varanasi reached another high point during the reign of Mughal Emperor Akbar, who was crowned in 1556 CE. His 50-year reign was broadly tolerant of different faiths, and the city saw new Hindu temples built, older temples rebuilt or restored, bridges laid, and the riverside promenade paved for the first time. But not every Mughal ruler was even-handed, and Akbar's great-grandson Aurangzeb ordered many Hindu temples to be destroyed during his reign, commissioning mosques to be erected in some of demolished sites. Following the demise of Aurangzeb in 1707 CE, the Mughal Empire slipped into decline and the Hindu Maratha Empire expanded out of western India. Varanasi and the surrounding area became a kingdom, ruled by the Maharajas of Benares. Sustained Maratha patronage led to much of modern Varanasi's urban landscape taking shape through the 18th century, with the buildings or restructuring of many of iconic temples and ghats. The British East India Company monopolised trade in India in the 18th and 19th centuries, and following the unsuccessful Indian Rebellion of 1857, the British governed the nation directly. Varanasi's civic fortunes grew exponentially during the years of British rule. A number of pioneering educational institutions were established in Varanasi, preserving and furthering the city's centuries-old academic heritage. The Sanskrit College was established in 1791 CE, dedicated to the study of the Sanskrit language. The Central Hindu College, which was founded in 1916 CE, evolved into the prestigious Banaras Hindu University, and remains an important center for arts, languages, and sciences, attracting students from across the country. After Indian independence in 1947 CE, Varanasi became part of the state of Uttar Pradesh. Its religious traditions and creativity have ensured its continued prominence in the modern age. Musicians associated with the city include Bismillah Khan, who brought the traditional wind instrument Shahnai to concert halls, classical singer Girija Devi, and global sitar maestro Ravi Shankar. Banarasi silk, gorgeously decorated with gold and silver brocade, is highly prized by traditional stylists and contemporary fashion designers alike. Even Banarasi pan, a juicy, chewable mixture of spices, nuts, and condiments wrapped in betel leaf, has gained legendary status among gastronomes, and makes a routine appearance at the end of menus across India. Above all, Varanasi remains a unique destination, drawing millions of people every year. The city's ghats are a stage of relentless human activity, where thousands of pilgrims pay homage to gods and departed souls, penitents wash away their sins in the waters of the river Ganga, photographers wait for the perfect shot, hawkers eye up opportunities, and tourists from around the world are overwhelmed by the splendor and bustle of this eternal metropolis. In 2015, Varanasi became a UNESCO heritage site for its musical heritage, schools, and festivals. The epicenter of political power in the Indian subcontinent for most of the last millennium, Delhi is said to have seen the rise and fall of 7 capital cities. The current Indian capital, New Delhi, is the 8th. Delhi finds legendary mention in the ancient Indian epic Mahabharata as Indraprastha, the capital city built by the Pandavas. Excavations suggest that the area has been inhabited since at least 1000 BCE, though the first reference to Delhi doesn't appear until the 1st century BCE, when a local chieftain named Dilu is said to have named the settlement he built there after himself. Delhi began to emerge as a political stronghold in the 11th century CE, when Tomara dynasty founded a citadel called Lal Kot on the southwestern fringes of the modern metropolis. In the 12th century, the rival Chauhans ousted the Tomaras and extended the fort with massive ramparts, the ruins of which still stand today, and renamed it Kila Roy Pithora. Then, in 1192 CE, the Chauhans were defeated by Muhammad Ghori, invader from modern-day Afghanistan, in a decisive battle that paved the way for Islamic dynasties to conquer the Indian subcontinent. Following Ghori's death in 1206 CE, the first of these dynasties was founded by Qutb-ud-Din Aibak, a formerly enslaved soldier, or Mamluk, who had risen to the position of general within Ghori's army. Aibak built his new capital on the site of Kila Roy Pithora, and named it Meheroli. Through the next 3 centuries, Delhi served as the center of power for a succession of Islamic dynasties. The Khiljis, who followed the Mamluks, fortified themselves in Siri, near present-day Horse Kos. The Tughlaqs came next, and moved their capital within Delhi several times, as well as decamping briefly, under the capricious Muhammad bin Tughlaq, to Dawlatobad in western India. Muhammad's successor Firoz Shah Tughlaq founded Firozabad in 1354 CE, where the Firoz Shah Kotla fortress is the most notable of several surviving Tughlaq bastions. The brief reign of the Sa'ids was followed by the Lodhis, whose legacy lives on in a series of fine tombs at the Lodhi Gardens, in today's New Delhi. Ibrahim Lodhi, the third Lodhi Sultan, inherited a divided kingdom, and his tyrannical leadership only made him more enemies. One of his governors invited Babur, a descendant of the Mongol Emperor Genghis Khan, to intervene. In 1526 CE, Babur defeated Ibrahim to take his throne, establishing Mughal rule over the Indian subcontinent. During his short reign, Babur based himself at Agra, but in 1533 CE, Babur's son and successor, Humayun, returned to Delhi and set up a new capital called Dinpana on the banks of the Yamuna River. 7 years later, Sher Shah of the Sui dynasty seized power and strengthened Dinpana, which he renamed Shergad. The ramparts, now known as Purana Killa, still stand today. Humayun recaptured Delhi in 1555 CE, but his successors chose to rule the empire from Agra, and Delhi went into decline. The coronation of Shah Jahan, the fifth Mughal emperor, in 1628 CE, however, was the beginning of a new golden age for the city. An inveterate and extravagant builder, most famous for the Taj Mahal, the new emperor turned his back on Agra and commissioned the brand new city, Delhi's seventh capital, on the Yamuna River. Work began on Shah Jahanabad, named after its creator in 1638 CE, and 11 years later the emperor and his retinue moved in. Shah Jahan's metropolis was a masterpiece of Mughal architecture. He commissioned a massive red fort, which became city's administrative core. Built of red sandstone, the emperor's palace complex displayed his lavish tastes. Within its ramparts were lush lawns and gardens, marble pavilions, mosques, apartments, and royal baths, as well as a marketplace where traders dealt in precious jewelry, gemstones, silk, and other goods. The royal court received visitors in the Diwan-i-Am, Hall of Public Audience, a magnificent sandstone pavilion supported by elegant columns and faced with lime stucco. At its back wall, on a marble pedestal, sat the emperor's bejeweled peacock throne. He would hold court with his most senior nobles at the Diwan-i-Khil's Hall of Private Audience, the walls of which were embellished with fine marble filigree and intricately inlaid with lapis, jade, and mother of pearl, the ceiling molded entirely in silver. Beyond the Red Fort, the walled city of Shah Jahanabad radiated westward in the shape of quarter circle sector, with the Yamuna River a natural fortification to the east. The city's commercial heart was a white bazaar that stretched for more than 1.5 kilometers either side of the Chandini Chowk, originally half-moon half-shaped square. The bazaar was cut through by a central water channel, later built over by the British, and linked with shops and stalls trading in exotic merchandise such as spices, perfumes, textiles, porcelain, jewelry, and medicinal supplies. To the south was the city's main mosque, the triple-domed Juma Masjid, rendered in red sandstone and white marble, and able to accommodate up to 25,000 worshippers. It still holds its reputation as the largest mosque in India. After Shah Jahan's demands, Shah Jahanabad continued to serve as the Mughal capital, except for a period during reign of his son, Aurangzeb, but repeated incursions from the Maratha Empire from western India and Afghan invaders from the northwest frontier weakened the Mughals' grip on the city. In 1739 CE, Delhi was brutally sacked by the soldiers of Nadir Shah, the Shah of Persia, who slaughtered more than 20,000 men, women and children in a mere 6 hours and pillaged the city's treasures, taking away the peacock throne and the famed Koh-i-Noor diamond. The defenseless Mughals had little option but to appoint the Marathas as the protectors of the throne, with the Mughals retaining nominal control only in Delhi itself. Further raids by the Afghans in the 1750s paved the way for the Marathas to consolidate their grip over Delhi 1757 CE, leaving the Mughal dynasty to wallow in political and military ignominy. In 1803 CE, British forces defeated the Marathas at Battle of Delhi, and the city came under the administration of British East India Company. The Mughals kept nominal access to the Delhi throne, shorn of virtually all power. In 1857 CE, after years of being throttled by a tyrannical British administration, Indian soldiers in the ranks of the British armed forces joined hands in a nationwide rebellion. United in revolt, thousands of soldiers marched in Delhi, where there was no British garrison stationed. There, they hastily declared the elderly Bahadur Shah Zafar, the last regaining Mughal, as the Emperor of India. The uprising, immortalized in history books as the First War of Independence, was short-lived. British forces soon regrouped and attacked Delhi, recapturing the city after a 3-month siege. The aftermath of the revolt was brutal. Company soldiers pillaged the city in reprisal, killing thousands of Indian soldiers and civilians and looting their properties. Bahadur Shah Zafar was taken prisoner, and 2 of his sons and a grandson were murdered on the site where traitors and state enemies had been routinely executed by Delhi's previous emperors. The revolt marked as formal end of the Mughals and beginning of direct rule of India by the British Crown, the period known as Raj. The British moved their capital to the less volatile Calcutta, and administered mansions and hotels became the hub of British social life. The once thriving area of Shahjahanabad, meanwhile, was left to fade into obscurity. By the early 20th century, Calcutta had become a focal point for agitation against British rule, and at the Imperial Darbar of 1911 CE, King George V announced that Indian capital would once again move back to Delhi. Construction of the new imperial city, were visualized by the architect Edwin Lutyens, began the following year. In 1931 CE, New Delhi, was designed as a grand statement of British imperial might, was inaugurated as the new capital. Yet British confidence was short-lived. Within 16 years, they'd be gone. When Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru announced the fruition of India's tryst with destiny to the Indian Parliament in Delhi on the eve of the nation's independence in 1947, celebrations across the city were widespread. Yet the cost of freedom was partition, as India was split along religious lines and Pakistan came into being. Sectarian violence broke out between Hindu and Muslim communities, thousands of Muslims were killed, and many more driven from the city. By 1951 the Muslim population had fallen from a third of Delhi's total to a mere 5%. The exodus was matched by an even greater influx of refugees from the northwest, for which the city was ill-equipped. Dozens of refugee colonies were set up on outskirts, which in time developed into new neighborhoods, but the city's growth was disorganized. In 1957, the Delhi Development Authority was established to future growth. But even though the master plan for Delhi that resulted acquired large areas of new land, the city still struggled to meet its housing needs. Meanwhile, the commercial life of the city began to change as it transitioned from a trading center to an industrial powerhouse. Many of the newcomers found work in the factories that spilled out in satellite cities such as Ghaziabad and Faridabad, which in due course were absorbed into Delhi's expanding limits. The staging of the Asian Games in 1982 heralded a new phase in the city's development, spurring economic activity and a further wave inward migration. High-rises started to appear on the skyline around the Connaught Place in New Delhi, the city's central business district, and the leafy suburbs of South Delhi began to flourish. By the late 1980s, the city had a population of 10 million people. The pace of change picked up again after the sweeping economic reforms of the early 1990s, which resulted in a wave of foreign investment and laid the platform for the unprecedented economic growth that has underpinned the city's transition into a modern metropolis. Today, the city of Delhi is home to 30 million people, with an urban sprawl that stretches from the congested lanes of Old Delhi, where life still continues with an unhurried 19th-century lilt, to the skyscrapers of Gurgaon's cyber city, where Fortune 500 giants spin the great Indian dream. A cosmopolitan hub, with arguably richest culinary scene of Indian cities, the capital has cemented its place as the nation's cultural center, home to sophisticated art galleries and markets selling handicrafts curated from across the country. In recent times, some of the city's medieval villages have been resorted and reinvented as cultural districts. Among these are Hauz Khoz, a hamlet built around a reservoir dating back to the Khilji era, which is now one of the Delhi's top hipster areas. And Lodi Art District, a hub for contemporary street art that has taken shape not far from the tomb of Sikandar Lodi. Rapid urbanization has also caused problems. The increasing population continues to put tremendous on the city's infrastructure, and electricity shortages are routine during summer months. And despite the still expanding Delhi metro, over 11 million motor vehicles plying the city streets often bring traffic to a near standstill. Pollution poses a serious health hazard city's residents. Nonetheless, as the country's premier location for government offices, public institutions, and private enterprises, Delhi continues to hurtle down the one-way street of growth and development. As new areas of the city develop, and futuristic experiments in glass and steel thrust skywards, Delhi takes its place confidently among rival global megalopolises, a force to be reckoned with for its cosmopolitan ethos, multicultural character, and enduring historic and artistic appeal. Over a brief but glorious period of around 230 years, Hampi rose to become the biggest and most dazzling city of medieval India, before being brutally sacked and fading into oblivion until the modern era. Historians believe that in the early 16th century CE, Hampi was the largest city in the world, after Beijing. In the heart of Deccan Plateau in South India, the ethereal, boulder-strewn landscape around Hampi has long been held sacred for its central role in the ancient Hindu epic Ramayana. It is known in the story as Kishkinda, the mythical kingdom of monkeys that lends support to Lord Rama in his battle against the demon king Ravana. By the 10th century CE, Hampi was well established as a pilgrimage center called Hampakshetra, from which its name derives, and it developed further over the following centuries under the Hoysala dynasty as a hub for religion and education. By the early 14th century CE, the armies of the powerful Delhi Sultanate to the north were aggressively making incursions south. With the reigning Hoysala Empire on the verge of collapse, two brothers, Harihara and Bukka, commanders placed in charge of repelling the invasions, raised a small army and in 1336 CE, set up a new capital at Hampi, a naturally fortified site on the Tungabhadra River. They named it Vijayanagar, literally means City of Victory. The early kings of Vijayanagar ambitiously pushed the boundaries of their kingdom in all directions. By the early 1400s, the empire had expanded to include almost all of peninsular South India. The city itself was made almost impregnable, surrounded by huge stone walls. Successive kings developed the city's infrastructure, building palaces and temples, roads and markets, as well as a sophisticated irrigation system of water tanks and canals. By 1509 CE, when Krishnadeva Raya was crowned king of Vijayanagar, Hampi had grown to become India's richest city as well as its biggest, with a population estimated to be around 500,000. It was now the military and political nerve center of entire Deccan region, and a formidable entrepot for intercontinental trade. Krishnadeva Raya ruled for a brief but eventful period of 20 years, an era that marked Hampi's apogee. The city went through unprecedented development and beautification. Many of the city's showcase temples, statues, and pavilions were completed during this period, and others were embellished with intricate designs, most famously the extraordinary stone columns at the Vittala temple, commonly referred to as musical pillars, which, when gently tapped, produce individual musical notes like a xylophone. When Domingo Paz, a chronicler hailing from the nearby Portuguese colony of Goa, visited Hampi in 1520 CE, he found the city to be of striking beauty. There are groves within it, in the gardens of houses, many conduits of water which flow into the midst of it, and in places there are lakes, he wrote in his journal. He went on to describe elaborate festivities featuring bejeweled elephants, dancing women, and lavish feasting, held on an astounding scale. Traders from faraway lands arrived in chariots laden with exotic merchandise, jewels from Sri Lanka and Myanmar, pearls from the Straits of Hormuz, Chinese brocade and Malabar spices, to sell in the colonnaded shop houses of the sprawling Krishnapura street market. The Portuguese writer Barbosa commented on the city's cosmopolitan, egalitarian air, where great equity and justice is observed by all, not only by the rulers, but by the people to one another. At this time, the city secured almost exclusive ownership, paid for in gold, of the finest Arabian horses, an advantage that underpinned the empire's military might. Yet the death of Krishnadeva Raya in 1529 CE marked the beginning of the end for Hampi. The tyrannical and interfering King Alaya Rama Raya united Vijayanagar Empire's enemies against him, and in 1565 CE, a confederacy of Deccan sultanates sought revenge. At the Battle of Talikota, Alaya Rama Raya was captured and beheaded, and Hampi was invaded, sacked, and laid to waste by the invading armies. In a matter of days, the once glorious city was reduced to a pile of rubble, which according to legend remained ablaze for 6 months. While local chiefs fought over the remnants of the empire, the city itself was never repopulated after the war. The ruins were gradually reclaimed by wilderness, and remain obscured from public sight for more than 200 years. In 1800 CE, after the British East India Company assumed control over the Deccan region, Hampi was formally surveyed for the first time. Since India's independence in 1947, the Government of India has focused attention on restoring and preserving many of its monuments, and today the ruins cast a spell over tourists and scholars from around the world. Indeed, many visitors find it hard to leave. In 1986, the group of monuments at Hampi, comprising more than 1,600 remains, is inscribed as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Thanks for watching. See you in the next episode. Please subscribe to our channel to catch up the more interesting topics and support our cause.